Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
Hello and happy Thor's Day to all who celebrate. This is our guy right here, Thor Nystrom from Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life platform of football content. And we had a good time last night, Thor, at Target Center, watching history be made in front of our eyes as the new Vikings franchise quarterback sat next to his star wide receiver and built team chemistry for 2.5 hours. The Wolves also closed out the Warriors, but history was made on that court last night with JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson showing just what they're building inside TCO Performance Center.
I had a great night, too. I got to watch JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson for 2 hours, and apparently a basketball game broke out around him.
Yep. That was the seeds to a Super Bowl championship.
Right there.
Like
Right
the
there.
Wolves were taking the steps towards an NBA championship, but meanwhile, off that tree, fell some things that began to just germinate. That was the seeds to a Lombardi last night that you guys saw.
I think those guys got to be sitting there the rest of this playoff run, right? I mean, how did the Timberwolves lose?
No, I think, the inspiration, the leadership that exudes from McCarthy bled onto the court and gave the Wolves a 23-point lead in the third quarter of that game. So, all right, we've got takes on the Vikings schedule. We're excited to hear what Thor's thoughts are now that we've got the order of opponents. But a shout out to Two Men and a Truck, which helped. You see in the background on YouTube, Declan's in a new home studio. That Two Men and a Truck helped bring a bunch of things into that room last weekend.
Yeah, thank God. My guys Artie and David came through. They were able to make this move super easy. They wrapped up all my stuff. They got it in the truck.
Those are your crutches right there?
Those are my crutches. I was able to make sure that I get all my weight room. I gotta stay really lifted and ready to go on a moment's notice. So thankfully, 2 Men in a Truck made that super easy. What they quote is what you pay. No hidden fees, no service charges. Hire 2 men in a truck if you're doing that move. Don't try to figure out a move by yourself. It's one of the most stressful things you can do. Let the experts handle it. Go to 2meninatruck.com to get a quote for your next move.
Thor, now that you've seen the Vikings schedule, what's your first big take impression looking at the Vikings schedule?
I like the schedule, and the take that I have, it has to do with the two back-to-back games in Europe. I think the Vikings actually get a competitive advantage there. I've heard a lot of complaints about that from Vikings fans about the back-to-back Europe games. I think the Vikings have an enormous built-in advantage for that second one against the Browns, already being ostensibly overseas, right? Not having to travel back, and now the other team has to travel across the country. I think that is an enormous built-in advantage, and if there's any fan base that should be complaining, it is the Cleveland Browns, in my opinion.
So O'Connell actually did a conference call the day that this was announced. I believe it was on Tuesday, and he did a conference or he did a Zoom call with the media in Ireland and then the UK, and in both conference calls, he talked about that. So I think this is going to be a tremendous burden for those in charge of the actual travel plans and taking all of the equipment, because it's a long time to be away. But for O'Connell's standpoint, I think it's a huge advantage because one, it gets you out of any chance of playing not just in hostile environments, but Cleveland and Pittsburgh weren't going to go back-to-back if they were played in those cities. So there's a very good chance that Cleveland or Pittsburgh gets put in December. Well, that's now out. The other thing is O'Connell talked about is he loves the fact that it basically creates a training camp environment, old school, because the team is going to be forced to be a team. Like, you're not going to go home after games. You're going to be together for essentially 2 weeks traveling, which can be a really good thing for team bonding. And then the last thing, Thor, and I think I texted you this, he also talked about the fact that he likes this from McCarthy's standpoint because it takes him out of two, not just hostile environments, but again, it puts him in probably more favorable weather conditions. And from a quarterback standpoint, I think O'Connell just would always prefer that because, you know, playing in December in Pittsburgh, probably not the greatest thing for what Kevin O'Connell wants to do offensively.
For sure. Yeah. And Kevin O'Connell, obviously being the California kid and played college at San Diego State. JJ McCarthy is a Midwesterner and a hockey player. He loves playing in bad conditions, but I appreciate that the KOC is looking out for him, and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that it's a big competitive advantage getting that second one. And O'Connell's point is great there as well about you remove that theoretically from December, those games. And also, I think the Vikings, aren't they going to have a home field advantage in those games? Maybe the Steelers one, they might have a presence over there a little bit, but
they will.
The Vikings have a big international presence. Yeah. So you take two true road games, and now all of a sudden you might even have a slight home field advantage in one, maybe a bigger one in the other one. That's a big deal. And then you look at the other three NFC North schedules, right? All three teams play 8 home games, 9 true road games. Because of this two-step in Europe, the Vikings play 8 true home games, 7 true 8 true home games, 7 true road games, and then 2 neutral site games. That's an advantage as well in that division.
I want to go deep in the weeds here on something. You tell me if I'm being too positive Phil here, or if I'm searching for something that's not there, Thor. But one of the biggest challenges I think for young quarterbacks is just all of the things you have to process at the line of scrimmage. The 40-second play clock starts right when the play ends, or 25-second play clock if it's a dead ball, and boom, head coach is in your headphones giving you the play call. You spit it out. You walk up to the line. Now you have to diagnose: are we running the play? Who's the mic? The center. Now you have a 12-year veteran center who's going to help you with some of this stuff now too, and that's great. But it's going to be largely quiet at the line of scrimmage for JJ McCarthy until week 8, notwithstanding the first game of the season at Chicago. But they play one true road game between weeks 1 and 7 at Chicago. That's going to be loud. It's going to be chaos. Those games are always weird. So that is a tough one, and it's a Monday night game. Fans are going to be all lubed up, I'm sure. But then it's home game, the Europe games that you mentioned, where even if there are Steelers fans and Browns fans, it ain't 70,000 of them drowning things out at the line of scrimmage as you're trying to process and communicate to guys, right? Then it's a bye. Then it's a home game against the Eagles. So only once in the first 7 weeks is JJ McCarthy going to have to operate at the line of scrimmage with chaos and noise from an opposing fan base. I think that's a huge advantage.
And that one true road game that you're talking about, it's literally in JJ McCarthy's backyard. The kid's from LaGrange, Illinois. He grew up in the shadows of Soldier Field. So he for his first game, I think that's if you're going to set a road game anywhere for that kid for his first game, that's probably where you wanted to do it. Very advantageous start of the schedule for the Vikings next year, I think.
And plus too, the week 8 game on October 23rd at the Chargers, that, my good friends, is going to be a Vikings home game. Yep. Like that is the Chargers. The Rams have some fans, and if the Rams play the Vikings at SoFi, is a ton of purple there. But I think the last time that the Vikings played in SoFi, if I'm not mistaken, against the Chargers, it was all purple. So like that's going to be a Justin Herbert silent count game.
Judd, the last time that JJ McCarthy and Jim Harbaugh were in the building for a game in California, it was the last day of Nick Saban's football coaching career. That was the semis in 2023 in the Rose Bowl. He's going to be pretty comfortable around Jim too. We'll see what Jim's got up his sleeve to try to defend JJ. But recall everyone out there, Jim Harbaugh that year, previous spring, said JJ McCarthy should be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He knows what he's going to be going up against that day.
Yeah, and to I agree with you, by the way. Just in general, the first part of the schedule, there are so many other ways that the NFL schedule algorithm could have put. I mean, for instance, you guys look at the Ravens' schedule to start the season. It is, and the Ravens have had a couple years with weird slow starts. But in the first 7 or 8 weeks, the Ravens have at Buffalo. They get Detroit in week 3, right? Into Kansas City on a short week at Arrowhead. Then it's Houston, who's a tough out. And then the Rams, who are probably a Super Bowl contender. All of that before their bye week. But you know what? It's Lamar Jackson. It's Derrick Henry, John Harbaugh. They can probably handle it. Again, if you're a first-year starting quarterback, there's other ways you could have shuffled this with the opponents on this slate where it's like, okay, what if week 1 was at Detroit and then you get Washington and Philadelphia and Baltimore early, and now it sets you back to start with. So I don't know how they figure this stuff. I'm sure they do different iterations, but you should be able to come out. I think it's like 4-1 in those first 5 games. Some people are saying 5-0 bye week, but now you're into October. Now you're into the flow. You've played a handful of NFL games. You're JJ McCarthy. Then the schedule gets really hard. It's like a phase 2 that you ramp up for. So they got lucky with the laying out of the first 5 games. The bye week might be a little early, but I think you'll take that with the way that these first 5 play out, Thor.
Yeah, especially with the advantage on the back end of that Euro trip, and then you get the bye, and then it's Eagles, right? I mean, you get the bye in advance of the Eagles. If you were going to pick a week to do the bye, it would either be that or Lions, right? Like, so you get the extra prep week for that. I think it lines up really well. And that the gauntlet part of the schedule, to your point, it's immediately after the bye. But at that point, you're already into week 7. You have your sea legs and your international sea legs under you, as it were. And then you have that 4-game stretch that's tough there. But yeah, the team should know each other a lot better at that point.
A bad start might not necessarily derail you completely, but it feels like a good start is imperative. Like if you struggle at the start here, which I don't predict that they will do, but if you did, it's really, really tough probably to recover. So there is some pressure here, but to Phil's point, it's also set up pretty well. 5-0 is really aggressive. I don't know that I see that. But I definitely think that 4-1 is doable.
Oh, easily. Yeah. I mean,
I'm just saying 5 wins is a really aggressive thing to say win all 5 games. I mean, a lot of things transpire in this league that can't be counted upon. I'm not going to expect 5-0, but I mean, I do think that 4 wins is not an unrealistic conversation.
Not at all. Yeah. And this thing, it sort of sets up, it's like a 3-act play, right? It's kind of like a movie. You start out, you're in McCarthy's backyard where he grew up against the quarterback that Chicago took over him in Caleb Williams. Next week, you go and take on terrible Terry Fontenot and his Atlanta Falcons and Michael Penix, who was also picked above him. So the revenge tour starts us off, and then you have that Bengals game in between, but then you have the Europe trip, the 3 straight games against the AFC opponents.
Yep.
Then you get your bye, and then you have that tough stretch, and then it sort of settles down a little bit with all the NFC opponents at the end there. I don't know. I really like this schedule for the Vikings.
Yep.
Can I give you another one of my favorites? It's again positive Phil coming in hot here. My favorite schedule quirks. That as you line up the Vikings opponents, you could argue that Eagles at home, Super Bowl champions. Detroit on the road, and then last game of the year, Green Bay, maybe for like the division or playoff positioning. You could make a case those are the 3 hardest games or biggest games of the year. And you might fight me on some of that, but they have extra rest and prep time for all 3 of those games. The Eagles game is out of the bye. You get 2 full weeks. The at Detroit game is after a Thursday night game against the Chargers. So you get 10 days to prepare instead of a week.
Yeah.
And then that Packers game is after a Thursday Christmas game against Detroit, where you'll have an extra at least couple days. That might be a Saturday game. It's some of those games the last weekend are Saturday, some are Sunday, but you get extra time to prepare for maybe your 3 highest leverage or hardest games on paper on your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the Vikings had a hand in the creation of this schedule, doesn't it? Like, there's a lot of things advantageous about. I mean, you were tossing out one of the ones where it could have gone the other way. You look around at some of the other teams' schedules, it's like that's kind of a bear. In fact, remember last year when we were looking at the Vikings schedule, it was like, after the Giants game, there's this bearish part of it. This one, it seems to line up much better.
The penultimate game catches my eye, though, the Christmas game especially. As a fan, I love this, okay? I love the Christmas game, break up the day, get off the couch. Sports Dad goes downtown. I love that. But let's talk about that game in particular and the challenge it presents to both sides. And field glass is very much in play, by the way.
That's right. So your little Santa hat walking into U.S. Bank Stadium.
So I don't know where Detroit plays on the 21st, but the Vikings are at the Giants. And then you come back and you play on Thursday, which means you barely have practice time. Both teams, and the challenge is true for Detroit as well, but like that's going to be, or it should be, a heavyweight game, right?
Yeah.
Like the Vikings made offseason moves in part to prepare for Detroit. They basically came away and said, we weren't tough enough. So I think that they're definitely tougher now. But you are going to literally have a 15-round heavyweight fight 4 days after a game on the road. That's a big ask of players. It's funny that people think the players are upset about back-to-back in Europe, because I'm with Thor. They shouldn't be. But that game is a large ask from both sides.
There's a lot of parlor intrigue with that one, isn't there? You have the really quick turnaround, and then with the Packers on deck, and obviously those are the three teams we expect to be competing for the NFC North championship. Sorry, Chicago, but yeah, you with the Giants game beforehand. We see this in college football way more. This is a classic SEC schedule. The end of the season, the second to the last week, third to the last week, the SEC in November, they always play FCS cans. So you'll see like Alabama against Chattanooga or LSU against, who is, some
Appalachian State.
Yeah.
Although they beat Michigan that one time, like 20 years ago. So you got to watch out for Appy State.
You absolutely do. But yeah, like they play the crappy opponent, and then it's before like their last. So it's like before the Iron Bowl for Alabama and Auburn. They just play the crappiest FCS teams, and they use those games as quasi buys. They'll throw their starting lineup out, but really quickly we're getting the bench guys, and they get some time in there. I wonder with that Giants game if you can do more rotational stuff and try to lessen the burden of snaps. For instance, on your defensive interior. Or some of those different positions, and we have more aggressive substitutions early. I'm sure that's something that they're already thinking about with that quick turnaround and then leading into those final two games against the Lions and against the Packers.
Hey, boys, small thing here, but it could be key. I just looked up the Lions schedule on the 21st of December, 4 days before the game here on Christmas Day. The Lions are at home, so that's to their advantage. They're playing the Steelers. 3:25 start. The Vikings start at noon.
Oh, okay.
Every minute counts.
Every minute counts.
That's 3.5 extra hours for the Vikings' bodies to recover.
Yep. Every minute counts. I'll take the noon start every time.
It's 3.5 extra hours of prep for the coaching staff.
Yeah,
and then they're the ones that have to travel to us, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So they're going to be on. Yeah. So they're going to be on a plane for a couple hours. That's let's call that 5.5 hours. You might prep on a plane, but you're not getting your.
Nah, you're not going to.
It's something. It's definitely something. Another schedule quirk here, Vikings related. So the NFL, it's really interesting because it's not random who they put on national TV and the standalone games. They don't just put everything into a random generator and look at that. Looks like the Titans are on. They got 8 standalone games, and the Arizona Cardinals are on Monday Night Football 6 times, right? It's very calculated. So the NFL is clearly featuring these 5 teams in standalone games. Chiefs, Commanders, Cowboys, all with 8. Chiefs, obvious, most popular football team in the world, Taylor Swift effect, casual audience, etc. Cowboys, even though they've been irrelevant from a Super Bowl standpoint for 30 years, they still index as one of the 2 or 3 most popular teams in the country. Commanders, with one of the most exciting young dynamic quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels. And then it's Lions and Vikings are the other 2 teams in the top 5 most featured standalone games. Lions have been this incredible story the last 2 or 3 years. But for the Vikings to be in this conversation, Thor, the NFL clearly looked at them and said, all right, they've been winning a lot of games. Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. But JJ McCarthy is a net positive reason to put the Vikings in standalone games. Last year, the NFL said, they took a little bit of a step back. They were a 7-win team. and it's Sam Darnold, so we're not really sure. We're going to keep him at noon. But what do you make of the NFL saying, yeah, let's put the Vikings in almost as many standalone games as the Cowboys and the Chiefs?
Speaking of intrigue, this is pretty interesting, isn't it? You have a difference here in two different ways of gauging these sorts of things. Optimism about this team in Vegas. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how they dropped the Vikings win total at 8.5. Seemed very, very light, right? But now the NFL coming out with their schedule, they have the Vikings all over primetime. Their billion dollar business. It hinges on, you don't want to toss out crappy teams in primetime and these sorts of things. Primetime games, you want the good games out there. The NFL itself is betting on the Vikings next year. Certainly more than Vegas is. So that is something that piqued my interest big time when we started to see boom, all these primetime games. Get them in on the holiday. Get the Vikings over there internationally. It really seems like the NFL believes in the Vikings in 2025.
I think the difference too is this. I think Vegas looks at a team and says, first-year starter, we don't know. We're not going to pile on. In the case of the schedule, it's the league, but make no mistake, it's also the partners that pay billions of dollars to carry games, right? And they say, first of all, O'Connell proved a lot with what he did with Darnold. The intrigue on McCarthy is going to be incredibly high, and he's a great storyline. So like Vegas doesn't care about your storylines. It's like, screw you, it's over under on wins. TV's like, this is really intriguing. The Vikings spent, I think, the second most of any team in free agency. And there's no question that all of those partners weigh in. I'm sure they submit requests on what games that they would like in prime time, probably more importantly, what teams. So I think that's the difference. I think the difference is that the Vikings are an incredibly juicy storyline team that could be good. And don't forget, too, we could play the game here of this. What games get flexed and what teams get flexed out.
Let's play that. Let's play
that. Week 18, boys, the entire slate, TBD. You're telling me there's not a very good chance Vikings-Packers Sunday night, U.S. Bank Stadium, Week 18.
Talk dirty.
And that's not a flex. That's a choice. I'm talking flex. I see these noon games at the Lions, Week 9. Noon.
Getting jacked up already.
So I'm just saying, 4 primetime games right now. Don't sleep on a lot of flexing and certain teams.
Okay.
Washington, I got being flexed out.
I got a couple flex ideas.
Yeah,
here.
let's see it.
Now, some of these, if there's big markets, you look at some of these Cowboys games. Well, that's the Cowboys draw eyeballs. The Cowboys are always among the highest rated teams. So,
correct.
If Dak is playing, they're going to be in there. The Bears are sitting there Sunday night, Week 17. It's the Chicago market. So if they're anywhere near, it's Bears San Francisco. I would say some prime Sunday night flex candidates. What's the first date we can flex Sunday night?
It starts earlier now than it used to, so it's pretty. I'll find it, but it's pretty quick.
Well, if it's November 2nd, I would circle Seahawks Commanders as one. If the Seahawks are kind of meh, you could definitely put a line through that one. Maybe the Broncos Commanders. They're putting a lot of the Commanders here, but the Broncos Commanders, we'll see about that one.
I got one.
And Bengals Dolphins in Week 16. The poor Dolphins. This is a home game for them. But I was looking at the Dolphins schedule because I'm sadistic this way. I'm always curious, how many cold weather games do they have to get stuck with in late November through January? It's 3 or 4. I think they're playing at Buffalo in December, the Jets in January, Pittsburgh or something. So there's a good chance the Dolphins are kind of dead by the time Week 16 rolls around. So those are some strong candidates right there, for sure.
Week 12. So the Vikings are playing at the Packers. That is a noon game on Fox. The current Sunday Night Football game that week is Buccaneers at Rams.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but those are two interesting quarterbacks. And
two interesting
it's
QBs.
an LA market.
But I could see that one being potentially flexed in or out.
And there's not a lot of other great games that week. Philly and Dallas probably be a top one, but Not a lot of great
Yeah.
options outside of
for
that.
Monday, because you could flex Monday games too. It only happened, I think, once last year because they're trying to be careful about that.
Yep.
But now I think the Panthers are going to make a jump, and the Niners have the weakest schedule, so they're probably going to win some games. But there is a Panthers-Niners Monday night game scheduled for October 24th.
Sunday Night Football flex starts now in week 5. It's week 5.
Whoa.
Good Lord.
Oh,
Monday
wait,
night-
let's scroll up.
Monday night, it's 12 days out, and it's only weeks 12 through 17. So, week 5.
This is Thor outside in the summertime.
Well, I got one for you.
it's time for some yard work.
I got my rake. I got my handsaw.
Just wear gloves, because if you rake without gloves, I've done some my hands are mangled. Week 7, the week 7 schedule, that Vikings-Eagles game could be very juicy as well.
Yeah, that's what are the top Vikings games that aren't currently prime time that probably should be? Eagles for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say the first Lions game at Detroit, week 9.
Yep.
And then, as of right now, both Packers
Yeah,
games.
that's what I was going to say. Both. So the Week 18 Packers game is a TBD. But are you telling me that both Packers games are going to kick at like noon or 3:25? I think it got. Didn't they flex the Packers last year to 3:25?
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the Ravens game is going to be fun. In week 10, you have in that game the guy who used to be my favorite quarterback in the NFL against my new favorite quarterback in the NFL. And that speaking of heavyweight fights, that is going to be a fun one. And JJ gets to take on the brother of his football father, in John Harbaugh there.
His football uncle.
Football uncle, yeah.
You said I put a pin mentally in something you said about JJ McCarthy like 15 minutes ago that I want to bring back up, because you phrased something in a way that I don't think people have thought of it this way, but I want to run this back at Thor in a second here. After we shout out MSP Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning.
Air conditioning is the key.
We're going to underline that one here for these hot days.
Air conditioning is the absolute key. In fact, today it's not only hot, it's muggy, and that is when the AC has to be working, because that's where comfort becomes key. And my friends at MSP, they do outstanding work, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you have any air conditioner issues and or concerns, definitely give them a call. And here's the nice thing too: join their Total Comfort Club. $8 a month, you're going to get an AC tune-up, a furnace tune-up, and a plumbing check. So get ahead of problems before they start. Get priority service, which means if you turn that air conditioner on today and it hems and haws and coughs and you're like, "Ooh, this ain't good," they're going to come right out and make sure that it is up and running, and repairs. Also, you get 10% off service if you belong to the Total Comfort Club. 651-615-4292, or check out their website, callmsp.com. Call MSP.com. Make sure that your home is comfortable in these hot, sticky summer months.
Another thing that could cool you down is a Black Stack beer.
Pour it on your head.
You could pour it on your head. You could just pour it in your mouth. That would be an
probably
option
better.
as well.
Probably
You could pour it on your head and let it run into your mouth. I don't know. Black Stack, world-renowned craft beer, available all across the state of Minnesota and also into Wisconsin, Nebraska, and South Dakota too. In fact, I was just meeting with the crew at Black Stack a couple days ago, talking about some fun future plans here. Purple Daily. They've got Bricksworth as well. We're doing an event at Bricksworth on Monday. Flagrant Howls Unplugged, 5 to 7 o'clock, Bricksworth, North Loop. Check us out if you're a Wolves fan. But blackstackbrewing.com to find out where you can buy this incredible beer. And if you haven't stopped into that tap room yet in St. Paul, it's the second biggest tap room in Minnesota. Awesome place to hang out, bring a group of friends, a 190-inch big screen TV, food trucks all the time. So check them out. It's also golfing season, Dex. The Meadows at Mystic is a great place to get around in with some friends this summer.
Yeah, I'm taking a look actually right now at the tee sheet for even this Saturday. I'm seeing openings right bright and early. You can fire off right at 6:30 a.m. In fact, it's going to cool down a little bit. It won't be that super muggy weather, so you'll have a nice little start to your day on the golf weather. GolfTheMeadows.com to book that perfect tee time. Send us a selfie too from the green, from the tee box. Show me how to not just hit a duff into the trees basically. GolfTheMeadows.com. It's a great place to go golf. Go check them out just down 169 here in the Twin Cities.
So, I don't know, about 15 or 20 minutes ago, Thor was referring to the Bears-Vikings game and talking about like McCarthy is going in, he's going to play, he's from Illinois, he grew up in the shadow of Soldier Field, and he'll get to play sort of in his home area. And you said he will play against the team that passed on him for Caleb Williams.
Yep.
And I find that way of looking at it really interesting, because as you go through the draft process, like there, outside of maybe you and Jim Harbaugh, there was nobody publicly at all suggesting that the Bears should be deciding between Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy. If anything, it was Caleb Williams, maybe Jaden Daniels, but the Bears were pretty steadfast that they were going to draft Caleb Williams. But when you go back in history, there's a couple examples, like the 2018 draft. I remember in the moment, you can check me if I'm wrong, the decision at the top of that draft was kind of, is it Baker or Darnold? And then a little further down, Josh Allen was available as a prospect, and Lamar Jackson was available. In the moment, it was not a discussion. There was no discussion that like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen should be the number one overall pick. But in retrospect, it's a huge mistake that those guys weren't. Maybe even 25 years ago, I remember Tim Couch was pretty solidly supposed to be the number one pick for Cleveland, and then Donovan McNabb was going to go second or third or whatever. So in the moment, it's like, yeah, I mean, Tim Couch is going to go number one. But in retrospect, it's a huge mistake. Is that how we're going to view this? Like, in the moment, it wasn't a discussion, but the way you phrased it, is it going to be viewed as, wow, the Bears passed on JJ McCarthy?
It's possible, of course, yeah. And that year with the Browns, yeah, you set that up right. You had Rosen back there, you had Allen back there, but they were never talked about as in consideration for the first pick. And then, of course, Lamar fell to the end of the first round. But that year, I advocated, and people can look back on my Twitter on this, because I was screaming about this, that the Browns should keep trading down, accumulating picks, and then just pick Lamar Jackson at one point. That Lamar Jackson is the other guy that I can look back on my career where I deviated from the herd with the quarterback evaluation. I had him top 5 on my board that year. Obviously, he went 32nd. If I was Chicago, I would have listened to calls more than they clearly did. Caleb Williams indicated that they told him more than a month in advance, and it might have been more than 2 months in advance. You're the guy. But in their situation, I at least would have listened to offers from Washington, one pick behind me, because Washington, their offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, had just come from USC. They certainly would have given you something to move up. Then the number 2 slot, you either get Jaden Daniels, who's going to have a better career than Caleb Williams, or you can trade down again and then try to pick off the local kid, JJ, later on. If you fell from, I mean, we have the benefit of hindsight here, right? But if knowing this, they could have done essentially the same sort of machinations that they did over multiple trades that they ended up getting back from the Panthers in the year before the Bryce Young trade up, right? And the Panthers relinquished this war chest of picks. I believe the Bears won. It was they dropped back to 9 or 10 with the Panthers pick. I forget. 9. I would have to look back. Was it 9?
I think so.
So if you had gotten to the 9th pick, of course they held the 9th pick, right? But like, you know, if you had gotten back there, you know, let's say 8th pick in this one, still could have gotten JJ McCarthy. But it'll be interesting to look back at. Terrible Terry Fontenot, he's going to be in the building. He's going to be confronted with his decision of Michael Penix over JJ McCarthy, which was another surprise. And JJ McCarthy, we know the kind of competitor that guy is. If you don't think that pushes him and gnaws at him every day, the quarterbacks who were picked over him and going 10th, you're kidding yourself. So, yeah, he is going to want to put on a show in those first 2 games.
So when we talk about this, though, Thor, how much do we also have to factor in the team that takes the QB? Like Tim Couch was an epic bust, but he was also taken by a Cleveland team that could, you know, was absolutely a disaster. Yeah. Like if you go back to the draft that Phil brought up, 2018, it went Baker, Saquon Barkley, Darnold. Josh Allen falls to 7 in Buffalo, but Josh was sort of a project there of some sorts, and Buffalo had great patience, and they cultivated him and developed him. If Josh goes 1 to Cleveland, like I think that
probably.
This goes back to the O'Connell statement last year, which is teams fail young quarterbacks far more often than quarterbacks fail young teams.
Amen.
So, like, how many of these kids that don't succeed are just true busts? I mean, Baker's playing really well right now, and how many are a victim of the circumstances to which they're inserted?
So often, you see this over and over and over again. Whether it's the dead end coaching staff, whether it's a misunderstanding from you have the pick coming from the front office side, from the scouting side, but it's not being done in conjunction with the coaching staff. So you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Essentially, there was a cool anecdote about how the way that the Chiefs draft and one explanation of it, like with the Ravens, we were talking this process. They have a philosophy of get more at bats. Eric DaCosta talks about that. Get more at bats, and the loser's curse was the study that he cited. So that's sort of the Ravens' philosophy. The Chiefs, the way that their success has been described to me in the draft, they have the BPA thing going on as well. So I'm not saying that they're different in that regard, but there is this incredibly close symbiosis between the coaching staff and the front office - the scouts. So when the scouts are out in the field during the season and they're looking for players, they're looking specifically for scheme fits for the Chiefs, right? And so you are already, when you pick those guys, you are entering them into a situation that is going to be best for their skill set, right? As opposed to a scout being like, oh, I believe in this kid and he'll succeed. But outside the context of the employment opportunity you're about to give him by inserting him into, X room in X scheme, that he doesn't end up fitting. The Lamar Jackson, 32nd that year to the Ravens, their entire strategy around that was, we will build an offense around Lamar Jackson, right? And they got to that by the second season. The Chiefs themselves with Pat Mahomes, there was a couple things in there we have to. It wasn't the same thing as Lamar, but Pat Mahomes was true YOLO gunslinger at Texas Tech. He didn't care, right? And so it was a lot of the sort of off-script stuff and then chucking the ball downfield. There was similarities there to the way that Caleb Williams played at USC. Caleb Williams is way more obnoxious with it. But the first year in Kansas City, Andy Reid believed that he could get Pat Mahomes to play on schedule, on time, within the concepts that the regular fan would think of as more like putting, right, or chipping. He already knew that Pat Mahomes could hit the ball a country mile. So let's just take the year to that. But yeah, Judd, to your point, the situation that you go in, it's so important. Even player specific. You brought up Baker Mayfield and doesn't end up working in Cleveland, but now that he's freed from there, his game is allowed to flower out. You're doing a scheme around him that befits his skill set, right? So his game is naturally going to play up. It is so important. And the way that O'Connell sees that and recognizes that and went through it, by the way, in the recent past. Kevin O'Connell, he was a developmental quarterback. He has seen this from the other side of it. He was released, and then he had to go and start about his coaching career. If anyone knows how important it is to get a young quarterback in and get all the factors around him just right and set him up for success, it is Kevin O'Connell. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, because not only has Kevin O'Connell been around the successful stories and infrastructures, he was around Tom Brady back 2008 as a teammate, and Matthew Stafford, when you pull him out of what Detroit was at the time, put him into the Rams infrastructure. But he's also seen the Johnny Manziels, Dwayne Haskins, like the tragic story. So he's seen kind of a question for you off of this when you talk about great environments, teams helping quarterbacks, and maybe failing quarterbacks more than the other way around. In your career doing this, evaluating quarterback draft prospects, who are like one or two guys that you feel like you'd love to see a different version of history? You'd love to, man, if this quarterback was so talented and was failed by his circumstance and people label him as a bust, and you'd love to go back and get a mulligan and take that quarterback and put him into a different infrastructure. Who are like, give us a name or two.
I'm going to go way back in the time machine. I don't know if most of the audience is going to remember. Some definitely will. The guy where I would love to have taken him out of his era and put him, like, let's say in this draft class or the draft class before, and see how his game would have played in the modern NFL is Michael Bishop, the old Kansas State quarterback, a big dual threat quarterback who had a big arm. And I don't think the NFL was ready for him when Michael Bishop came out. We hadn't gone as much to this speed and space type game where the dual threat guys with the big arms, they cause real problems for defensive spacing. There was things Michael Bishop had to work on for sure. It's it's like the stuff we talk about with Jalen Milroe, or Lamar, or even Pat Mahomes. Like I was just talking about, had to learn the timing anticipatory concepts, right? Because if you force the defense to have to defend the intermediate, now you're thinner up top, right? Now we can take advantage of you downtown. That would have been a guy where I would have loved to see him modern NFL and see if he would have succeeded.
He was in the Peyton Manning draft.
Yeah.
The 1998. He was a 7th round pick by the Patriots, which is interesting. The Patriots were taking little shots late on, and then it was the next year that they took a 6th round shot on another quarterback that became a little more successful than Michael Bishop.
Was that KOC?
Tom Brady.
Oh,
Brady. Yeah.
Okay. KOC is a few years.
He was a few years later.
Yeah.
The incredible thing,
they kept taking shots, that right, and they hit on one.
Yep.
The incredible thing, Thor, though, is that you can make a case that the teams in this league weren't prepared for a guy like Bishop in 2018 with Lamar Jackson.
For sure.
Like you look at the amount of teams, and this is the problem. I feel like it's getting better, but it's not fixed. This is the problem with having a philosophy that you will not deviate from offensively. And we've seen it, or we have seen it here in the past. I mean, Brad Childress was like that. Like he took Tavares and said, Tavares is going to play my style. And there was no wiggle room there. But, when as many teams passed on Lamar, and I think Bill Polian, who was just doing commentary by then, he sort of told the ugly truth, which is, I don't think he's a quarterback at all. Like that's the thing is sometimes we're like, these guys are so smart. We can't possibly get inside their heads, how they think. And sometimes like they're not that smart. And Baltimore, which by the way, whose head coach is a special teams coach, a former special teams coach, is the guy who said, screw it, we will revamp an offense that has been, by the way, successfully run by Joe Flacco for quite some time, because that's the smart move.
Yeah, people, you think about the NFL, and then you think about it's like a different world, and but it's the same thing as with your job. Anyone that gets a good job, you just want to hold on to that job. And when you're in a seat like that in the NFL, the easiest way for self-preservation, it's to go along sort of the trodden trail, right? Like not deviate. That's why you see so much of this herd thinking. And those sorts of philosophies. If you can just look at it a little bit different, right? Just rotate the diamond in your hand, and you can start to see it from a different vantage point. You can start to see things that other people don't. That's obviously what Harbaugh did there with Lamar Jackson. It would have been interesting, earlier if a team had tried to do that, like with a guy like Michael Bishop, like I'm mentioning. But yeah, you have guys that are dogmatic to their systems, way to a fault. I just brought up Cliff Kingsbury. The reason that Cliff Kingsbury got fired by his alma mater, Texas Tech, is because he had quarterbacks that fit his system for years. And then the last 2 years, after Mahomes was gone, and I forgot if there was one other guy after Mahomes, but it might have just been right after Mahomes. He whiffed on a quarterback that was Cliff that was like of his ilk. He likes the guys that can move around a little bit, obviously in the air raid, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Pat Mahomes, et cetera. And he whiffed on his handpicked guy. It was this guy named Jet Duffy, and he was sort of an undersized swashbuckling scrambler, but he got in trouble. And because of that, Cliff just had to have a lead-footed transfer portal pocket passers the last 2 years. His whole offense devolved, because he wasn't willing to modify it at that time. It was like, no, you run my system. Take a look back the last 3 years. Pat Mahomes throwing for 5K every single year. You can't, you're in the most advantageous system in college football. I don't need to modify to you. You need to modify to me. Now you're getting your walking papers out of Lubbock, where you were the most popular guy. And Cliff, since then, I was impressed with him going to the NFL, because I think he learned his lesson. I think he got humbled there. I see now with him, and especially last year, you saw the manifestations of this really start to shoot out, where he is now building offensive philosophy schemes around the players that are in it. So it's sort of the opposite thing. And then sequencing play calls to the opponents and stuff like that. He has become a much better play caller because he fell on his face there at the end of Texas Tech. Sometimes failure is our best teacher. And I think it taught Cliff Kingsbury. Now he's one of the better play callers that we have in the NFL.
Yeah, we're very quick to just, if someone stumbles or gets fired or whatever it is, to just, well, that's the end of it. There's no, You could argue that on the defensive side, Brian Flores, who kind of fell on his face, and of course he's suing the league for some of the reasons why he may have fell on his face, but the things that people said about him, and now, okay, let me take a step back, go learn from Mike Tomlin, Kevin O'Connell, treat people a little bit differently, and you're in two different ways. You're seeing it with Kingsbury and Flores and other coaches. So
that's a great shout out, Phil. Yeah, because like with Flores was always the mad scientist guy, always the man. If we got that guy on our sidelines during the game, we literally have an advantage. You talk about seeing things that other people don't see or willing to do outside the box things. That guy's an all timer, as far as the defensive side of the ball. But to your point, the issue with Miami, it didn't have to do with his play calling or how he saw players or anything like that. It was the communication thing, right? Both above him, and perhaps he has legal standing there, where there was nothing he could have done about that, and the stuff with the ownership, and did they literally offer him incentives to lose games and tank? Yeah, we don't know about that, but then we do know way more about the communication with his essentially subordinates. Right. And Tua being a famous example that didn't like him. There's been other people that have done that. Have you guys, now, of course, he's their current employer, but have you guys heard anyone complaining about Brian Flores with even guys that leave the building?
I haven't.
I have not either.
Judd.
So that marks a clear, because once you leave as a free agent,
right,
you would think you're open game. If you didn't like the guy's personality, take subtle shots. We haven't heard any of that. Brian Flores now, he's going more towards being a player's coach.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one thing we did see is when those Tua comments came out, you had 2 or 3 players literally standing right next to Flores at the podium, right? Like like they walked up and just to show some support that like, hey,
his guys love him.
You're wearing the T-shirts with the Flores for a little bit too. Yeah, it's like all stand in solidarity with them. That's their boy.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, if and when he gets another chance to be a head coach, would be his relationship in particular with quarterbacks and offensive guys. I think he is wired perfectly. I think defensive players love his mentality because he does coach tough. But I mean, it's National freaking Football League. You should coach tough. Mm-hmm. But like, if you were to run the entire program again, that's where I think that there would be some questions, because O'Connell has a huge advantage because his starting point is, I know quarterbacks and I know how to coach them. I mean, that's just, I think it's a fact. That's becoming more and more important for anyone who gets a job now, just because the position is now just so important.
Well, Judd, this is the last stage of Brian Flores' metamorphosis into a butterfly as far as coming back on the head coaching trail, getting to witness the NFL's best young quarterback, learning from the NFL's best young quarterback whisperer the next couple of years. I mean,
it's a lifetime movie.
Yeah, hey,
it's a lifetime movie. I got the job.
That's it. Like, if you want to learn how to develop a quarterback, you got a front row seat, pal.
Love it.
Amazing. Thor Nystrom from fantasylife.com every Thursday or Thursday here on Purple Daily. We're excited because in a couple weeks, we're going to get our first heavy dose of Judd's camp notes. We're going to get to dissect Judd's handwritten observations, some of these rookies, undrafted
I already gave
guys.
some on Sunday with Dex.
Mm-hmm. Oh, homework for Judd.
Yeah.
We will in the next, maybe even for the Saturday checkdown.
Yeah.
We will take you up on the 3 biggest special team storylines.
Oh, okay. Sure.
You did 5 offense, 5 defense.
Yeah, don't miss those.
I almost want to get down. Usually I don't get down to the practices in the summer, but I almost want to get down so I can sit by Judd and just see an artist at work. I saw the first camp notes, drop on Twitter, and it's almost like, the smoke coming out of the basilica when Judd starts dropping those camp notes. Like it's time now.
From Egan. It's coming from Egan.
Yeah.
That's right. Not a lot of people were talking about Theo Jackson 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Judd's camp notes was talking about Theo Jackson.
Right. Johnny Munt.
Yeah.
Johnny Munt.
Mm-hmm. That was one of my greatest calls of all time.
Yeah, I know. Greatest third tight end.
It turned out O'Connell loved him.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. All right, Thor. Great stuff, dude. Appreciate you. You can follow Thor on Twitter or X at ThorKU and find his work at fantasylife.com. For the Sports Dad, for executive mustache producer Dex, I am Phil Mackey, and this is Purple Daily, where we just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. See ya.